couple. So the point about NIPE has been around for 8 or 9 years now, and the point about it is that we have actually more of a conversation than just people sitting up front. And the really good ones, we had a very good one a few years ago about EMV, where we had a merchant who didn't like EMV, and we had a guy in the EMV migration forum. And it was great, they almost came to blows, and it was a really wonderful conversation. Now, I don't think this will be that animated, but the point of it is, ask questions, get engaged, because this is a somewhat complex topic. And the way I wanted to, well first, let me introduce the panelists. I'm very, very pleased to have these folks on board. In a lot of areas, I do consulting with Christiane and another partner, and I'm around a lot, so I meet a lot of people. And these are folks I've seen that really impressed me with the way they're thinking about this. And when we put events together, I say, okay, who can really help have a very good event and in a difficult topic, explain it well. So first, we've got Lance Coons, and Lance, DWT, I should be up on the other slide actually. DWT are a year-long annual sponsor. Let me see if I can get this to work. Was it Alt-Tab? And that's the intro slide, right? The intro slide. So he's with DWT. I met DWT a few years ago, and we've done many events together. And Lance, why don't you tell us a little bit about your involvement here?
Sure. So just for the record, I am not a tech developer. I am a lawyer, and I've been in this space though for about 4 years now in the blockchain distributed technology space. We have a practice group here with about 20 attorneys in it, and like probably most other attorneys in the space, it's gotten really interesting in the past year, and we're doing work on many different types of projects. The regulatory stuff has been really interesting. There's been a lot of IP work, believe it or not, even though some people would say that there's some that's an anathema in the sort of open source space, but we've done quite a bit, and we've done just a host of other things. I come at this from a different angle than a lot of people. I am by trade an intellectual property attorney myself and a litigator, and so I was first introduced to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies by a journalist friend who was writing about it regularly and started asking some questions around IP. And from there, I got really interested in the space. And the first thing we did was host an event around blockchain for the music industry, which was one of the earlier sort of spaces outside of payments, I think, or fintech that people got interested in, and there's still development in that area. And since I've just expanded what I do and know about, a big group of folks that do a lot of different things. So that's me.
And then you're next to is Scott. And Scott, I've been known, what, 3 or 4 years now?
Yep.
For different events. I've bumped into Scott at different events, often related to merchants. And in fact, Scott was on a panel I ran at a merchant group just last fall, I guess it was.
Yeah.
And I knew Scott as a way of coming up with his, he can talk about it in a moment, way of coming up with alternatives for merchants to pay that are more cost effective than the payment rails. And when I last spoke to him, I think I saw him at an event a few weeks ago, he said, oh yeah, we're working on this that's cryptocurrency related. And Scott, why don't you give us a little bit about what you do?
Thanks, Dave. My name is Scott Muller. I'm CEO of MShift. We're out in Silicon Valley. We come from mobile banking. So we actually had the first mobile banking deployment in the United States back in 2001. So secure financial transactions, millions of secure financial transactions. So we've done everyone from the tiniest credit unions all the way up to Capital One and Chase. So if you're logging in on your phone, you think you're logging into your bank, you may not be logging into your bank, you may be logging into our servers, and then we talk to the bank. So that's been our bread and butter for years. In 2011 and 2012, we started to look at mobile payments. So not just doing transfers, but the ability to pay using your mobile device directly from the mobile banking application. We innovated a new payment rail. I'll go into more detail later. Yeah. But basically, with cryptocurrency, we're able to bring down to 0 cost transactions for merchants. So remove interchange, which is a massive point of pain for merchants. And at the same time, we're able to reward consumers with cryptocurrency for every transaction that they do.
And then Michael Zokowski, right? Yeah, right, okay, good. So, I do a lot of events, and I was invited to a alumni group for a university a few weeks ago to do an event, and the second panel of the event had Michael on it. And I sat back and listened, I thought, man, this guy knows his stuff. And I already had in mind, well, you look for people on a panel who know their stuff and are articulate and can explain it well, particularly in a complicated topic. So, as this idea came to mind for this event, I reached out to Michael, and fortunately he's available. Hit it.
Great. So I'm Michael Zokowski. I am the CEO of Promethean Labs, which is a cryptocurrency developer, and we're specifically working on a new crypto network called Logos. And Logos fundamentally is a scalable transaction network. And the seed for what we're working on has been a problem that's kind of been front and center in the crypto community for several years here, which is how to scale from single digit or low double digit transactions per second into the thousands or hundreds of thousands, and really unlock the capabilities for some of the most interesting use cases of this technology. So we're a bit in stealth mode right now, but I get out from time to time to speak at these conferences. We're going to be publicly launching in terms of marketing and the actual technology in the next few months here. My background is academically math and statistics.
But we'll keep him from getting too deep.
Yeah, well, I'll keep things pretty high level here. And in the past I've spent a lot of time investing in the space as well. My job before crypto was in quant finance, and so it was a bit of a more gradual path into crypto, primarily driven by the real fascination with the technology and the potential for it.
So, there's a quote I saw the other day that I am a general transactions guy, not by any means an expert in these things. There's a quote that sort of summed up the way I think about it. There's a guy named Adam Ludwig who runs a company called Chain. And when Jamie Dimon made his quote about Bitcoin last fall, he wrote a letter that was up on Medium. And that was great. He said, let me start by stating what I believe. This is him. The market for cryptocurrencies is overheated and irrationally exuberant. There are a lot of posers creating them and some scammers too. There are a lot of conflicts of interest, self-serving hype, and obfuscation. Very few people in the media understand what's going on. Very few people in finance understand what's going on. Very few people in technology understand what's going on. Very few people in academia or government understand what's going on. Very few people buying cryptocurrencies understand what's going on. And it's possible I don't understand what's going on. So one of the purposes of this is to focus on the specifics of, will cryptos ever be able to take the place of the means of payment we use today, credit cards or whatever. I mean, mainly that's the main thing we think about. And the other point of it is to give some insight into it so you walk away understanding a bit. So if there's anything that you're unclear on, or start getting into a buzzy word and I haven't flagged people on it, say something. And
I have a more succinct quote. I'm sure some people have seen this one, but it's John Oliver's piece on a couple of weeks ago, which
I didn't see that
the
one.
quote was, cryptocurrencies combine everything you don't understand about computers with everything you don't understand about money.
That's good. But that's why we put this event as a very focused event, and that's why I've got these wonderful people here to talk about it. So, first point, probably most of us know, what are the big blockages right now that are keeping cryptos, in whatever form, from in any way making a dent in the way we pay for stuff?
Sure, I can start off here. So there are, you can categorize the headwinds into a few different categories. First there are exogenous factors. These are things like the regulatory environment, which I'll defer to the lawyers to speak on that. But primarily, from a technology standpoint, there are more endogenous factors, specifically the capacity that these networks can handle, as well as the confirmation latency. So how long it takes for a transaction to effectively settle. So you look at something like Bitcoin, and its transaction capacity is 7 transactions per second, and the confirmation latency is an hour.
So just to stop there, the transaction capacity is, what would that be analogous to? Would that be analogous to the initial authorization of a credit card, or what does that mean?
Yeah, it's like a Visa can only actually process 7 transactions per second.
But you
And
won't know
beyond
that
that,
it's, you won't know that it's done.
Pinned out, it's a clearing and settlement included.
yeah, precisely, yeah. How many, it's the fundamental bottleneck of the network. How many transactions can come in and reliably come out at the same time?
And to add on to that, it's not even just a money transaction. So like, let's say if you want to create like a Facebook and make it on the blockchain, okay, and you like a post, you want to say, oh, I like that. Wait, it's not showing, right? Because you don't have that immediate response back. It shouldn't take 10 minutes before the application responds.
So there's a response time, and then the confirmation piece of it is saying that it's actually confirmed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, precisely. So the capacity is how many can go into the confirmation process per second, and the latency is how long do you have to wait for that confirmation process to not be reversed.
So
with
to
high
go
probability.
into something our payment geeks know, it's almost like there's something called authorization, swipe a credit card. And it's almost like you can only do 7 authorizations per second. So you swipe the card, you swipe your card, you swipe your card for it to go through, and then it takes a day before it approves the transaction.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that is a bottleneck.
Yeah. So
And
you
we
know,
should, I'll just add, just as a piece, just to at least on the Bitcoin blockchain, there's also the fact that higher, you know, if you pay more for a transaction, you move higher up on the priority list too.
Right.
So there's
Right.
a non-democratic aspect to it as well.
Yeah, same with Ethereum. So
Right,
you
same with Ethereum,
pay
right.
more gas in order to get your transaction through faster.
And so why is that? Just, that's the dumb good question. Is it because those people doing the mining, is because those people doing the mining say, what's gonna make me the most money?
yeah, so in any block that's being added, the miners or validators have discretion over which transactions to include. So if there are 10,000 transactions pending and you can fit 1,000 in a block, then the miners are going to choose the transactions that pay them the most money. And so you get this pay-to-play factor where, you know, the highest transaction fees get priority in processing, and which leads to runaway effects like in Bitcoin we saw last year. I paid personally, I think, $40 for a single transaction.
Because otherwise it might have taken 3 or 4 days for someone to
Yeah,
get to it.
exactly.
Yeah, and the problem is, like, what if you want to get your money out and you can't get your money out?
Or if you wanna cash it out to fiat and you can't get out.
And it's not possible because everyone wants to get their money out. I know I've had many times last year where, you know, you'd see a lot of activity in the network, and then at the time I was using Coinbase. Coinbase would go down, okay, and you'd want to do something, okay, and there's no possibility to do it. So that's a major issue. What you have right now with the existing blockchains, and you know, see if you agree, disagree, you've been able to develop a proof of concept. You can show that this really works. Okay, we do have a method that the blockchain is effective, but it's only a proof of concept. It's not scalable yet. So there needs to be a new 3rd generation type of blockchain that is scalable, can handle the transaction volume.
Now, that is a function of the way the proof is done, or take me a little bit further with that. These bottlenecks you just described, what is the underlying reason that those bottlenecks occur? You described the action, but why? Why is that happening?
Proof of work, proof of stake.
Yeah, so it comes down to the architecture of these systems. So Bitcoin is the canonical example. They have a proof of work, which is, you know, the technical term for mining, blockchain system. And this imposes certain limitations, right? Fundamentally, you need to know what the previous block was to add the next block. And that's, you know, the entire idea behind a blockchain. And so you're stuck in a serial model there. And, you know, the proof of work aspect there, basically all the miners are in a race. They need to solve an arbitrary problem to add a new block to the chain. And
the problems get harder and harder and
right,
harder to solve.
exactly.
And you made the point to me earlier, is that the actual writing to the block is easy, but the problem that was put in place to ensure, what would you say, validity of it, is what chews up all the energy, because the proofs of work
Yeah,
is
exactly.
massively, and it requires almost, to enter that world, you have to have lots and lots of computational power and lots of energy.
Yeah, precisely. So if you're a Bitcoin miner, 99.999% of your energy, hardware usage is done in the mining problem, not with actually confirming that a transaction, all the boxes are checked. This is a genuine transaction. Most of it's just wasted energy here. Now, there are good reasons for this architecture initially, but we've moved past that. And as Scott mentioned, these are useful proof of concepts, and now that people accept them, they're more efficient mechanisms or architectures that can be implemented. And so there are a ton of ideas out in the space, rethinking what mining should be. Are there alternatives there? Rethinking what the underlying data structure is. Should it be blockchain? Should it be something else? There are a ton of components that make up the crypto network, and they were necessary to bootstrap us from the state of the world where blockchain has zero value to where it has hundreds of billions of value. But now that we're at this state of the world, there are better solutions there, and legacy networks are hampered inherently by that architecture.
And the legacy network you'd say would be the original Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin all the way up through something like Ethereum, which even though it's only a few years old, stuck by that paradigm.
2015 when it goes started?
Yeah, they had their pre-sale in 2014 and launched in 2015.
Yeah.
Now, Ethereum is actually trying to change their underlying architecture, but they still have to work within the bounds of what's possible. They can't completely rethink what they're doing, so they still have some limitations. So I'm sure, Scott, you can speak to your choice of the network to deploy an application on, but there are all these interesting applications that really can't work on the existing networks, and that comes down to their architecture.
Sorry, go ahead.
Please.
Fundamentally, the validators on the network are spending the vast majority of their time on something that is not, confirming that these transactions are valid. It's an arbitrary problem. So we're really far from the limits of hardware. The limits of hardware are what we see in centralized networks with certain overhead. And fundamentally, it's the architecture that's imposing those limits.
I actually want to throw a question to the audience. So audience participation time. So who here owns Bitcoin? Yeah, like Ethereum, altcoins. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And a question like altcoin. Which one do you own? Like, is there any that you'd like to promote or talk about? No. All right. Okay. So I'm gonna speak a little bit about EOS then. Okay. And are people familiar with EOS? Okay. I see some nodding and some shaking their heads. All right. Okay,
So talk about what it is.
all right. So yeah.
This gets into the different ways that we're sort of drifting into. How does one address those problems that we just spoke about with the original blockchain Bitcoin paradigm?
Yes. Yeah. So EOS is doing a new proof. They call a distributed proof of stake. Okay, which means that the miners in this are chosen by the community. So you vote for who is going to be the block producers. There's a group of 21 block producers. There's 20 that are elected, and then one that just pops in. If they do bad activity, the block producers can be removed. But the a lot of stuff there. But what the advantage that it gives is that they've been testing out their transaction speed at tens of thousands of transactions per second. And I believe Visa is at 5,000 transactions a second.
So let's stop for 1 second. How many of you are familiar with the difference between the proof of work and proof of stake? Okay. Do you want to give a little spin at that one? Or?
That's yours.
Sure. So proof of work, as we went over, is mining. And the fundamental problem here that we're trying to solve is, the technical term is called a Sybil attack, but you can imagine a straw man distributed system where you post your transaction on Facebook and all the people who agree with that transaction like it, and then if it gets enough likes, then that's a valid transaction. The problem with that system is someone can create an arbitrary number of Facebook accounts. There's zero cost associated with creating a Facebook account, so you can game the system.
Bad actors can take it away.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a number of attacks there. You can double spend, reverse transactions, those sorts of things. What you need is some skin in the game or some barrier to entry to gain validation power. What mining fundamentally is, or proof of work, is you buy computers to gain validation power. So you can get more validation power, but you have to buy more computers.
So the validating, the gating criteria is an investment of computing resources and
Yep.
consumption of energy.
Yep.
So you need the computing resources to solve the computational puzzle. And in doing that, you chew up tons of energy, so it's really highly consumptive. Well, what are the stories I've heard is that in a certain period of time, it's using as much energy as Denmark does, or something like that.
Yeah,
Crazy.
these European countries.
Yeah, like
latest is Ireland.
Yeah, the Ireland is, so, and that's really not sustainable.
Right.
And it's also just, but that's what's used to gate, that's what's used to say, bad actors can't just pop in because it's too costly.
Yeah, and there's another issue here, which is your incentive alignment, and we've seen with Bitcoin, the miners are not aligned with the token holders, and this leads to horrendous governance issues.
I missed the word, they're not aligned to what?
The miners do not have the same incentive structure as the owners of Bitcoin.
For you as if you own Bitcoin, you want your transaction to go through fast and you want it to be inexpensive. If you're a miner, you want to earn a lot of money on those transactions.
Yeah. So it's a classic issue with the payment processor wants to maximize payment fees. So they might not necessarily support the solution that leads to optimal scalability, because that'll, just by market dynamics, reduce their pricing power. So an alternative is what's called proof of stake, and the idea there, so EOS is a derivative of this type of system. Ethereum's moving towards this system, so it's kind of a hot topic. My network is using this sort of system. Instead of buying computers, what you do is you buy the network tokens. So you still have to make an economic investment, and you can't just gain arbitrary validation power. And your vote in the system, so to speak, is proportional to how many tokens you buy.
So it's like buying chips at a table, at a gambling table almost, to get into the game?
Yeah, it's sort of analogous to that. You gotta buy the house currency to play the game here, and so that obviously the incentives are more aligned there because your investment is in the tokens. You want to maximize token value, and the other main benefit there is you're able to coordinate the activities of these miners or validators, I should say. So whereas in Bitcoin or a proof of work system, everyone's racing to solve the same problem, they're uncoordinated. You can actually coordinate the validators in a proof of stake system. Scott gave one example here of a delegated model where you can have various slots for validators. They get to propose their transaction. There's a lot of schemes there, but the key insight is if you can coordinate miners, you can achieve a lot higher throughput without the issues of wasteful energy, improper incentive alignment. A lot of things get solved.
That's key, because what you're doing is you're aligning the desire of the owners of the token with the block producers. And so, for example, what's happening with EOS, I think there's 50, currently 50 some odd block producers who are vying to be the block producer of that 21. So like EOS New York is one group that says, hey, we want to be a block producer, and here's why we want to do it, here's what we think we can add to the platform. So then you as an owner of the token would have the ability to elect these as to represent you.
So, let's say David says that it initiates a transaction, say I'm gonna pay Christian 10,000 tokens, whatever. How does anyone know that that's a true transaction? I understand the difference in the way I'm proving it, but how does anyone of the 20, 21, however, how does anybody know that that's really a good transaction?
So you can get pretty deep in the weeds pretty quickly here.
But there. So that I can understand
no, I'll keep stopping you, but I'll keep restating it if I don't follow what he's getting. So, that's a question I had too, because.
So this is an interesting question here. This has actually been a period of active research in distributed algorithms for 40 plus years. So there's this famous problem, the Byzantine generals problem, that was solved in 1980, I think, and that was the first solution here. But fundamentally, what it boils down to is you put something at risk for these validators. So an example is they have to stake a certain quantity of tokens here. They put it at risk, it gets locked up. And if they get caught misbehaving, then they lose their money. So it's an asymmetric payoff structure. They get small transaction fees, and if they're acting correctly, if they're acting incorrectly, then they lose a lot of money. And so there's a way to align incentives
or
there.
lose the ability to produce blocks.
Right, yeah, or you get voted out. There are a variety of schemes there.
But how do they
But that's
actually
not,
know?
this is, I think her question's a little different.
Question's different.
Which is, you know, how do the nodes know that a transaction that has been submitted to the chain is a valid transaction from the
Yeah.
user, which in some ways, ultimately the answer is that bad data in is gonna be bad data out. I mean, you can't, it's valid, you know, it depends on what you mean by valid. So what do you?
Smart contracts for
Yeah.
Ethereum or EOS is sort of the next generation where there's a value already, and these proof of stake algorithms are making use of it by anteing up, per se. I think is how people typically get into the game today now that they've heard about it. A centralized exchange like Coinbase or Binance, etc. However, I think the trend moving forward is towards decentralized exchanges,
Yes.
like 0x, and
So what's the difference? I mean, I know the difference between centralized and decentralized, but in Coinbase, I join Coinbase.
Yes.
I sign up, I have an account, and then I think I have an account somewhere, I've never used it. But, and then I go into them and I look at a market, I can open up the app and I can say, I wanna buy these, and then I have to transfer money in with my credit card or whatever, and I purchase the crypto. In a decentralized one, like you described, how does that happen?
I believe it would operate a similar way, except you're not depending on a centralized authority. Instead, you're buying into a decentralized cryptographic proof that says you can trade, you don't have to convert to fiat anymore. You can trade Bitcoin for Ethereum, for EOS, etc. You are self-sovereign and not reliant upon the centralized bank, i.e. Coinbase. So it removes hurdles of, regulatory hurdles, to be quite frank, that Coinbase and Binance need to comply with today. Beyond that, it's very valuable in terms of interchain transactions, but it's all just very theoretical at this point.
So let's bring this back then, because as I said, we get very weedy in here. Let's bring it back to the use to buy stuff with, and that's what we're kind of working through now. You talked about some of the constraints of the legacy and the proof of work system. So talk about what you're working on right now and how that would get around that problem. Now, Scott, you're in the middle there. Why not say something?
All right. Okay.
Let me throw out one,
Yeah.
before we get
Oh,
there,
please,
because
please.
I want to hear, I'm actually going to be interested to hear the answer to this, but one other, I don't know if it's a constraint, I don't know if you would say it follows from either of the other constraints we've talked about, but volatility is a real constraint currently
Yeah.
too, right? So I just want to throw that out there, that you can't, as you know, to use any of these cryptocurrencies as a, you know, as a medium of exchange at this point, if it's going to go up 300%, it's just not going to work.
Right.
So,
because then you don't have merchant acceptance, because the problem from the merchant side of you is you're buying $1,000 worth of goods. At the end of the day, the merchant wants to have at least $1,000 worth.
And they don't want to know that when they receive their money, it's a whole different number.
right.
Yeah. I mean, they're very happy if it went up 20%, but they're
But if
pretty
they're
upset
going down
it's
20, they'll be
20%.
pissed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
they're using like an intermediary thing, like somebody exchanging Bitcoin for USD at that time of transaction, and there's like a hedge, and they're paying a relatively
Yeah,
high
and
fee for it.
that's why there's,
And that's the
that's why there's,
problem.
that's why there's very limited merchant acceptance, because you have to get into almost a hedging business, almost like an FX-like business to do it. You can't just take the
It
payment.
can't be transactional right now.
Well, but that's what,
But
carry on.
that's the next, yeah.
So you had a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention it because we hadn't talked about it, so.
Okay, so there's the slowness of it that we talked about, it's just, it's not effective, it's throughput, you can't get enough throughput time, you gotta queue up, and then to get confirmation takes a long time, and then the currency value can change, it's like, you know, it's like crazy, you know,
Okay.
you've never seen FX valuations with fiat currencies like this.
Yeah, at least the trend line is going up, so.
This
Come on.
I answered the same thing in my notes, where volatility of crypto, merchant acceptance, and that currently where we're at a proof of concept, but not true scalability. We do foresee that with the EOS blockchain, that they have the capability to have scalability. Back to your point on the proof of stake. They're still in the midst of their ICO. They started their ICO last June, and they're selling 2 million tokens a day. And right now they've raised a little north of $2 billion. have announced, I think in total, $1 billion that they're putting out for investment to get distributed apps to be on their platform.
So this goes a little bit to the earlier question of how do you establish the value right away? You do an ICO, you are giving birth to the currency, the cryptocurrency, and it's being valued by the marketplace of how much that's equal. Now you have coins out there that have a value associated,
Yeah,
right?
and their $2 billion that they've raised is now equivalent to, I think, I checked the market cap today, it's like 11.5 billion. So it's, and that's without coming out with a product yet, okay, and which to me is stunning.
And that's because people are trading the quote shares and thinking that it's valued more?
Well, it's a very difficult process to get the EO shares, and so or tokens.
But
We'll delete that from the.
Yeah,
exactly what
You
that
just
doesn't.
kind of proved my point, but go
Yeah,
ahead.
we've explained how the value is created and how a value is assigned to it, how the coin is created, but it doesn't address the volatility problem. So how do you start addressing that?
That is a key problem, and that needs to be answered. And there are quite a number of companies that are looking at stable coin solutions. Tether is one. Yeah, you want to talk about stable?
No, not really. I mean, I don't want to talk about Tether at all. I mean, there's a, you know.
I'll tell you, when I was sitting here greeting everyone, somebody said, I saw that you mentioned Tether, that's why I wanted to come. So somebody has to talk about Tether.
I mean, you know, just for those who don't know, I mean, Tether is supposed to be tied to the dollar, and there are, you know, there's lots of questions in the market about.
So it's like the Argentinian peso being dollar linked.
Yeah, I mean, they are allegedly
Or
holding reserves, you know, 1-for-1 for every Tether token issue. There should be $1 US in their bank account, but yeah, you get these, you know, $300 million clips or so of creation, and leads people to question whether, in fact, they do have the reserves. And
So this is an
they've been
effort
slowing
to
the
address
lines.
the volatility, but it hasn't.
But I mean, whether or not that's what's going on with Tether exactly, I mean, that's an example of a stable coin where you would tie the value of the token to a particular thing.
So,
US dollar.
And I honestly, David, I think that there is not the answer yet. There's been a few stabs at a solution. I don't think there is a true solution yet for answering the volatility of the market.
So why isn't it a good solution to just blockchain either digitize fiat currencies but use the blockchain technology? Why isn't that a good idea?
You mean being like a government?
Rather than
Yeah,
print
central
bills
bank
and
issue,
put it on
it's
the
the money
blockchain?
flower.
Okay, so you want to do the money flower?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a pretty good. I wouldn't call it an eye chart, but I'm gonna have to let Scott talk to it because.
You created it.
I didn't create it. This, to go into detail on this is actually
Not too much detail.
Okay, a kind of expanded Venn diagram. So you're looking at the different components. I'm just going to stand up and walk.
Yeah, I think there's a pointer somewhere. Let's use your hand.
All right. So this was created for the Bank of International Settlements. So who's the Bank of International Settlements? It's the central bank for central banks. Okay, and it was under the concept of should there be a central bank
Who showed up? Make sure you get it.
Yeah. So okay, and the paper's author worked for the New York Fed, and I think he's now a professor at UC Santa Barbara. So go Gauchos. So okay, so there are 4 different elements here. Okay, so yeah, and this is related to currency in general. Is it universally accessible? Okay, that's the red. The blue is it electronic?
Accessible means can you use it pretty much anywhere, or can you get a hold of it?
Do you have ubiquity? Do you have ubiquity of acceptance? Can anyone grab it? Okay, so something that's okay. So is it universally acceptable? Is it an electronic system? Is it central bank issued? Okay, and is it peer to peer? Okay, so let's take cash. Okay, cash, is it universally acceptable? Yeah, pretty much everyone will take cash. Okay, is it peer to peer? Yes, I can pay you in cash. Okay. Is it? Let's see where.
Central bank issued?
Central
Yes.
bank issued? Yes, it is central bank issued.
It's not electronic.
It's not electronic. Okay. this, where how far do you want me to go into this?
Well,
So,
is this good, is this good?
Central bank,
yeah,
cryptocurrency?
central bank cryptocurrency.
Right, so
and
that, why isn't that the solution?
it could be, they're looking at whether this is a solution or not, okay? And I'll tell you where I believe that it will not be the solution, okay? Because governments want to track everything that you do with your buying at the pharmacy, where you get your cup of coffee, when you're walking around. To me, that's a surveillance state.
But that would almost say that anyone who uses Facebook wouldn't care about it because they don't care about privacy.
I think it's
I mean,
becoming
Once
increasingly
they
an
truly
issue.
recognize
I think
what it
that's
does.
another,
Yeah, no, I know. I'm making a joke a little
Yeah,
bit there,
yeah, but you're going back to why do people still use cash? Why is cash always going to be there?
it's
Because
the most
but
anonymous thing out
ultimately I
there.
can trace back any transaction to the on and off ramps, and that's what, how
Correct.
Silk Road and all that is brought down. So even if you have a quote anonymous virtual currency, you still have the on and off ramps. Now you can say it can get so far back if you even track it. So, you know.
yeah, so from my perspective, and then I'll sit down and let other people take, but I think that what will make a cryptocurrency succeed is it doesn't need to be fully anonymous, okay, but you do need to have a way to track bad actors. But tracking bad actors for bad activity doesn't mean that you have to track everyone on the network for everything that they're doing.
Okay, so
To your on-ramps and off-ramps point, yes, and then you have to have some way of doing a very clear identity of the people as they're entering into the system.
that's the KYC,
KYC, AML.
question here.
Yeah, other regulatory gaps that, or issues that cryptocurrencies face, I think, are GDPR. I think it's like fundamentally at odds with.
You all know GDPR, guys? The new privacy regulation that came up from the EU. Okay, he knows. He's from England. Even though in a while they won't be in the EU anymore. I had to say that. Go ahead.
So privacy by design is great, and I think blockchain, like public blockchains, might be able to offer that. But you can't like become unknown. You can't be forgotten with a public blockchain. And even if the ledger is pseudo-anonymous, which might be a good solution for CBDC currencies that address all of the current and future.
Things like a Visa card, MasterCard, I would consider that to be ubiquity of acceptance.
Yeah.
So I would say right here.
Well, we're not
Isn't
necessarily
that
ultimately.
ultimately a central bank issue because it represents dollars or euros?
No, but the central bank doesn't issue your Visa. They
No, but the money that represents.
Necessarily talking about a solution, a single solution down the road that's going to blow up everything on that map. And find
Correct.
a sweet spot. It's always a spectrum of solutions, right? So, your solution is going to be, you'd like to capture as many pieces of that as you can, presumably, right?
a couple of small pieces. Yeah. No, so and I'll if I can spend like 30 seconds a minute on what we're looking to
Take
accomplish.
45.
Hey, cool. Okay, so what we're doing, we're coming in through the banking system. So for us, we've enabled the fiat payment rail. We're rewarding the consumers for every transaction that they perform, meaning you don't necessarily need to buy stuff in cryptocurrency. You can buy stuff using your cash from your checking account.
So,
But the method is you're using our rail in order to do the purchase. You're rewarded in cryptocurrency.
So that addresses one problem I thought about is why would a consumer choose to use that? Now, if the consumer really cares about anonymity or limited exposure, that could be a reason, but that's not a large cohort. But you're giving a solution there that would say, if you use this way to pay, you will get a reward.
We realized that in order to succeed, we couldn't just be a discount off of the Visa or MasterCard rates. We had to completely change the game. So we had to remove the friction for the merchants, which is the cost of payment acceptance. So if we can make a zero cost for the merchant in order to accept the payment and to pay them in fiat, okay, so when they receive their payment, they receive it in dollars. But at the same time, because this rail is being used, we're able to reward the consumer in cryptocurrency. So effectively, our method of mining per se is the transaction. Okay, you do a transaction, you earn the cryptocurrency. The anywhere mobile cryptocurrency is worth it.
And then do you make money based on speculation on the underlying, like how do you make money if no one's paying?
You have an ICO.
We're not doing an ICO. We're actually doing well, I'm not going to talk about it on the video, but what we're doing. But
I
we'll
know
talk about it
I hear
afterwards.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
We'll have a beer afterwards.
if
no
the
problem.
merchant isn't paying you and you're giving money to the consumer, how are you making money?
We foresee that we are entering into a transition into a token economy. So 5 years, 7 years from now, you're going to see a large swath of Americans holding their wealth in the blockchain versus in their accounts. They'll still have their bank accounts, but it's going to be moving more into that. And by rewarding people in cryptocurrency, I'll get that. But rewarding people in cryptocurrency, I'm not asking people to buy anything. Okay, all I'm asking them to do is use this rail instead of an alternative.
So is this sort of a long-term acquisition tool by getting people involved? Because if the transition you foresee occurs, then it would be beneficial to you?
It will be very beneficial to us, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's speculative and the value will go up.
Well, we get compensated in the cryptocurrency that we are rewarding to people as well. So that we do have an inflation model within our system, and we get compensated off of part of
Like
the
XRP kind of.
Yeah, different, but yeah. But XRP would be where you see where it says AWM settlement.
Yep.
That would be XRP.
Yep.
So universal settlement coin, that would be there. So wholesale bank transactions, cross-border transactions, that would be on that green on the right. So our sweet spot is that green on the left, which is retail payments.
Yeah.
So I want to pitch over to Michael now, because you're thinking about this. You're earlier in the game than Scott is. There is that incentive that we just talked about with Scott for a merchant to want to get paid and for a consumer to want to use it. How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, so there are a few models that you can use. An inflation model effectively socializes the cost across the asset base, and it's certainly been the most successful model. Bitcoin itself has a similar model where you incentivize validators on a network to join by having an inflationary model. This extends it a step further, and you end up incentivizing the actual end users. So that's certainly a
So
very
the dumb guy
interesting model.
question: what is the inflationary model?
Well, you have 100 tokens at the start of the year, and over the year you reward consumers or validators or other stakeholders of the network 2 tokens, and that's a 2% model, and that distributes the cost over the entire system, and it's a rather efficient way of attracting people into the
So basically
system.
you create more coins, therefore.
You're
I'm not taking it from anyone, I'm creating more to be able to give people an incentive.
But at the same, you don't want
So
runaway
it's like I'm
inflation.
issuing more shares if I'm thinking about a company.
You can't say shares.
No, but I'm saying as an analogy, right? If
Yeah,
you work it out,
it's similar to the
everybody
normal-
goes down and
Sure,
hopefully
yeah.
it all goes.
Well,
up.
and then it becomes like, okay, are you creating an inflationary economy? Is it bad to have inflation? Is it good to have inflation? Healthy economies have some inflation. They have a low level of inflation. That means you're a growing economy. So it's not bad to get more coins into the system, as long as the system is expanding enough to handle that need, and then you have growth of the value of the currency higher than inflation.
So one quick add-on there, a corollary here, and it's kind of an open question, is how do you deal with that volatility issue? And so a key component here is related to the confirmation latency. If it takes you an hour to confirm a transaction, that's a lot of volatility to hedge. It takes you a fraction of a second, that's far less volatility that you actually have to hedge. And so you can completely abstract the process, the underlying network, from the end user if you have very fast latency, or very low latency, I should say. And so that's a key component, I think, with any viable solution, is being able to finalize these transactions very quickly so that cost of hedging is minimal. And that initiates a positive feedback loop where you have more real economy users on the network, and as the share of speculators decreases, the volatility will naturally dampen and get within an order of magnitude of a normal currency, and so then that further decreases the cost of using that network, and so on and so on.
So let me just spool it back for myself. So if the settlement time is that rapid, then the room for volatility decreases clearly. You don't have any time in there.
Yeah.
How does that drive speculators out?
It's not that speculators are not going to be attracted by that. It's just, you know, if at the present, almost all these, in fact, all of them are primarily speculative user bases, holders of these networks and their tokens. But it's just as this becomes a viable solution or a viable rail for end users, they'll start migrating onto the network. And so it's not that if you get a successful network, you'll probably have more speculators in absolute terms, but that should be outpaced by the actual real economic users.
Lance, you had a point?
No, yeah, my point is a little more maybe macro than that, which is, you know, what I find, and so as a, especially sitting as a lawyer and looking at a lot of different projects that come along, I mean, you know, it's what I really like hearing, or exactly the way David set it out, is like, what are the actual obstacles here? And because, you know, you will hear in this space just, you know, many dozens of solutions for every one of these problems,
Very
right?
true. Very true. Very true.
And so what I find fascinating about it is that there's, you know, when you start talking about things like governance, then really you're recreating all of these. I mean, we're looking at new ways to do things in which we're recreating entire governance systems on smaller scales and figuring out which ones are going to work. And some will and some won't. But at the end of the day, I find it incredibly fascinating that we're going through this process right now, and we're going to see some that, you know, that will play out and will become really, I think will become pretty big players in the space. But it's going to be a while before it all shakes out. You know?
Before Ford had the Model T, you had hundreds of American manufacturers of automobiles, hundreds, and then he innovated a method that he paid his employees well. He created a very solid product, and he charged the least possible price that he could in order to deliver a profit. Right. And it took off. Right. Yeah.
But this phase right now feels like identifying the problems that stretch across all of these, you know, especially these underlying layers, and as we and then you can start, you know, trying to solve some of these problems, which it seems to me is what's happening.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question? Yeah, Scott, you know, the type of mechanism that you're putting in, incentivizing people to use the system. I believe you have tokens. People at some point have to use the token. At some point, you know, can you explain how it works? What I've seen, like in the Bitcoin, is obviously limited supply. People wait. You know, they're not using for day-to-day transactions. They want the value to go up. In your case, how does that work? Can you explain that?
Sure. A lot there. Okay. Well,
take it piece at a time.
Yeah. So let me give you kind of like the first inference of it. So the first inference is you have a, let's say you go to Target, and there's no Target in New York, right?
Yeah, there is one
Brooklyn.
uptown, and then no, there's one up on 125th Street.
Yep.
Okay, everyone knows where the Target is. Okay, so
Maureen's got a Target question. What?
No.
Okay.
There's not 3 or 4.
Okay. So let's say you go to Target and spend $100. Okay, buying clothes, groceries, whatever, and you use Anywhere Mobile to do the transaction. Okay, the merchant gets paid $100. Okay, no interchange fee. Okay, they get paid a full $100, not $98, $100. Okay, so that they're very pleased about that, and they want to move as many transactions as they possibly can down that rail. The payment can be done either from the mobile banking application, it can be done from a standalone Anywhere Mobile application, it can also be done from the Target app. Okay. Also, as we're going on YouTube, Target is not a customer. I'm using this as an example. Okay. So now you as the customer. Okay. I don't want you to be a customer that I'm extracting value from. I want you to be a stakeholder in the system. Okay? The way I create you as a stakeholder in the system is I reward you with a token reward, and we're playing around with what the number is going to be, but it's going to be between 5.5% to 10%. Okay, so of the transaction. So I'm establishing effectively a crypto savings account for you. Okay.
So is that sustainable over the longer term?
What we're doing is as we get those tokens out, that is the propagation of the token. Okay, now you have the ability, you can either keep it in your savings account, you could go onto an exchange and trade it. Initially, we're not going to be the guys that do that exchange for you. You're going to have to go somewhere else. okay? But if there is a market for it, okay, you got to be a lawyer now for me, okay? But you know where I'm coming from on this,
Sure.
okay? So it's I'm delivering something to you that you know, again, you're talking about value, okay? There's got to be a value ascribed to that. I don't know if when I deliver that to you, if the token value is going to go up or down. I really don't know.
That's my point, because if it's going up, I'm not gonna spend it. If
You
it's
may,
going down,
I don't know.
will
It's
spend it.
yeah, but now that's you. That's your design to spend that. That you're different than other people. Okay,
Yeah.
some people may not even pay attention to it at all. We also want to be completely seamless, so that you don't need to do any activity other than just go to the merchant and do a transaction, and now you get a little bit more.
What would, I'm gonna ask a question then. What would stop you from, or what would be the advantage to your system to not creating something that was more like a stable coin for, you know, since ultimately what you want to do is drive utility on the system?
Yeah, we're paying a lot of attention now on the stablecoin component, especially within the system. So there's a component of and we're looking at okay, without going into too much detail, you can create a hierarchy where you have one coin that's within the system, one coin that's without the system. How do you track those two together? Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing to note here, stable coins, there are some really interesting ideas out there, but ultimately someone's paying the economic cost of, you know, holding that volatility exposure.
So stablecoin essentially means what it says. It's a coin that doesn't fluctuate, and somehow someone has to offset the market valuation changes.
And I will say, on top of it, there are some that are trading live. There's Tether, but we'll ignore that for the time being. But another example is DAI. But even Tether, DAI.
Because that's not a very exciting name.
No, yeah, I don't, yeah, it's so the company's maker. There's another base coin out there, but even those
base coin.
Yeah, that's another project out there. Those fluctuate on the open market, you know, plus or minus 5% within a dollar within their peg. So that's still not, you know, a perfect solution here. And on top of it, someone's paying the cost here. In order to create these coins, you generally have to pay a fee. So it's, you know, I don't think it abstracts the problem a layer, but it doesn't, you know, remove the problem.
Right. Sure.
Questions?
So how are you, from the perspective of the merchant, how are you, or are you not providing any of the other services that a processor might provide, any kind of analytics data? Does the merchant have to figure that out themselves? Would you charge for that, value-added services? How do you do that?
Sorry, I have brain freeze on that one.
Sorry, very practical, tactical question.
Yeah. So we were trying to remove as many of the middlemen in the system as possible and try to automate the process as much as possible and give the merchant all the data that they need on their transactions.
So it would almost be like going back to an electronic, it'd be almost an electronic version of cash, where they got cash, they had very little analytics on that, and this would just be an electronic.
And also here's something is the merchant can get a lot more analytics when they run the application through their channel versus taking it from the bank channel. And give another example. And I'm not going to use names for merchant. Merchant A, okay, I like a lot. Okay, Merchant A, I shop there twice a week. Okay, Merchant B, I go there once every 2 years. Okay, if I need to buy, you know, a Coleman sleeping bag, right? Okay, and I don't really want them to have all my data. Okay, I just want to do the transaction. Okay, so Merchant A, where I go a lot, you know, I'm happy to share all my data with them. I'm happy to get the 5 or 10% additional rewards that they want to give to me, you know, for downloading their app and doing all their information with inside it. Merchant B.
This is almost going to what's happening with tokenization in the card world, where tokenization, the card world has been rolling out, and that has broken the merchant's ability to track their customers based on their card number, on their PAN. And so the importance of loyalty programs, which you just described, so you would attach an independent merchant-centric
exchange within their own cartwheel or whatever.
We got 2 questions, I think. We got a blue shirt and a brown shirt question.
So, Scott, it sounds like
Nothing pejorative about brown shirts there.
Scott, it sounds like what you're describing in terms of moving towards a stable coin incorporates two-way pegging, where you can exchange where you can have an EOS token sit on a separate ledger. Is that correct?
Well, it's not the EOS token. Let me rephrase that. So we're looking at. We'll have to go in the back and talk on this.
Okay.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
I just think that there's an interesting intersection between the supply chain management side of crypto economics and value of cryptocurrencies, incorporating two-way pegging.
Yes.
That you talk about.
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And it's exciting times.
Michael, anything further to add? 'Cause I had another sort of summary question about getting the merchant acceptance or the customer acceptance. Any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, I think important in all these systems is just the economic incentive structure, and that's going to be driving the adoption here. You fundamentally need to have a value proposition. Right now with Bitcoin, it's completely non-obvious because number one, it takes forever to settle. You're not going to move from a less than 10-second settlement in credit cards to a hour settlement. The transaction fees are high, capacity is limited. Once we move beyond those, you still have to make that fundamental value proposition. Can you provide savings to your end users, in one way or another, either directly or indirectly? So we see a lot of systems out there, and I think a lot of them are lacking on thinking properly through what's my economic incentive structure and how will that drive adoption.
Yeah, there's almost, if you take it down to sort of the ICO level, there's very little of that kind of analysis that's provided around, 95% of the ICOs that are out there. Like, what's going to actually drive adoption of? It's more, this is a really great idea.
Right.
If there was a system operating in which there was a token that does the things we want it to do, that would be a great system. But it's the getting there part that's really not. And many of them that's part of what they're doing now. These were all, essentially pre-sales, and they are now presumably wrestling with those issues. But there hasn't been a lot of that kind of analysis. And there's not a lot of.
There's someone shaking their head there. Do you have a comment there?
I would assume most of them are taking their money and disappearing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, some are. There's a lot of great ideas out there, but there's been a reluctance to have real world solutions or real world integration. It's all been digital. And I think leading to David's premise for this, when will crypto ever become currencies? You need to have merchant acceptance. Okay, when you have merchant acceptance of not necessarily the coin, but the solution that the coin is a component of, then you have a real world solution.
Something to add to that, there's another potential path to success depending on your exact application, but that is being able to enable one of the markets that we are specifically targeting is the microtransaction market. So these could be, anything from existing products. You could look at, ads or microtransactions as a replacement for ads. You're talking in the millions of transactions per second of extremely small value, and current systems really aren't able to process those.
It's got to be many-fold magnitude faster in
Yeah.
order to work that. And that's kind of what you guys were talking about with musical solutions, right? At TWT?
Yeah, I think you could probably look across the spectrum of industries and identify solutions that if you have the ability to do microtransactions, that you can open up whole new realms of commerce that's not there right now. And we did, one of the things that the people in the music industry that were looking at this, some of the startups, that was one of the very earliest promises was that if we can do transactions for content on smaller and smaller scales, you can monetize really granular pieces of content. It's just the same as advertising is the same. That is digital content, right? So to the extent that you can track it, manage it, and then turn payments off of granular pieces of content, whatever it is, that's a market that just doesn't exist right now. You have to aggregate stuff now.
There's some interesting conversations going on amongst the tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers to the automotive industry about connected cars, sharing information and paying for information, trading alternatives. That's
Just to rephrase this, because it was a little, it's about connected cars and the automotive manufacturers and about using these sorts of micro payments between connected automobiles?
yeah, so the car that's driving you, with no driver, automatically needs to know if there's an accident ahead or if it needs to go some a different direction. So the car, it asks the cars ahead of you for information. But the cars that supply the information gets some brownie points, and they're given to them by the car that's asking for the information.
So the brownie points being some sort of
Yeah,
reward
positive, but
in
yeah.
this past.
Yeah, if you use Waze right now and you're basically crowdsourcing all of the traffic information from everyone out there, and everyone out there who's providing it, you know, the return is they get to use the Waze service, and then, but if you could also monetize that in some way.
There's no value, as far as I can see it, there's no value. The value stays between the vehicle, with the vehicle, and so it's just the vehicle's trading.
So, and I'm not gonna go too far off track, but that made me think of something I read a while ago about information, just, we're a little bit off track. But probably someone has thought of this, the notion that you own your information and you can sell use of it to people
Yes.
for a value, and if you can build something like this on top of it, you could come up with a way to compensate me in some small amount for marketing or taking my information to market.
Well, that's the Brave browser's trying to do that. I mean,
That's
there are
the
a lot
what?
of, the Brave browser, which is
Yeah.
a competitor to any of the other internet browsers. The theory is, I mean,
Brave,
there's,
like-
it's tokenized, and there's supposed to be
Basic attention token.
basic attention.
Oh,
token,
basic
the
attention
BAT
token.
Yeah, so that's, there are a lot of proposals out there like
Yeah,
that.
it's,
Yeah,
so,
this stuff can be generalized to Internet of Things, you know, it's a prospect in the future, not really here now, but you can envision a future where you have all these devices connected. They don't necessarily trust each other, you don't need to trust your neighbor's devices, but they could be exchanging valuable information, beyond even cars, you know, staying within cars, charging stations, decentralized electricity grids.
Yep.
These all things aren't really possible under current technology, and if you introduce a rail that facilitates those, you know, there isn't an alternative to compete against, it's the only option.
but it has to be a frictionless payment rail, because you can't do it under the existing system where you have to pay gas in order to get a transaction.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Hard to pay people to get out of my way if I'm in a hurry.
Yeah,
Maybe you could maybe do it with the driverless
I
car.
like that, now I'm excited about it.
Could you imagine that, where like all these self-driving cars, it go just.
Yeah, but it would be a high price. So, we're getting close to quarter of, and